Oh my gosh, Rebecca. Well, so your story is so fascinating because you had like a kick-ass, corporate job working in Big Four. So can you kind of tell me about what you were doing before you got into real estate investing? And then we'll kind of go into like the transition and everything after that.
Yes. So I was thick in the corporate world. I was a director, associate director at Deloitte. I had been in my corporate career for around 10 years before I transitioned into senior leadership. And, until then, I was really, really just so maniacally focused on climbing up the corporate ladder and just doing more and doing better and having a bigger team and having a bigger pay. And then when COVID came, I don't know, I think everyone has a COVID story, but I had my twins, while COVID was happening. And a lot of times I would find myself alone at night, spending time with them. And both of them are girls. And I would start asking myself questions like, if these girls were to grow up and ask me, whether I was living a fulfilled life, what would I say? If they were to ask me advice on my career, would I be able to give a genuine answer? Right? Am I truly fulfilled in what I'm doing? And that's when I started to explore different things, including short term rental real estate. But until then, I was really just, your typical corporate girly who was just hell bent on showing the world that women of color like me could do just as well as our fellow corporate men out there.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and I feel like it's this identity that you take on because I felt the same way. I was like, I have to show young women of color that they can be engineers and that they can go into male-dominated spaces and they can crush it. And I remember for me, I had such like a corporate identity like grieving almost that happened, like grieving this old part of me that I'd felt like I was for so long. And I'm curious to see if you felt that because, and I say this because one of my friends, she's kind of going through a shift right now in her life where she kind of has to decide, like, is this actually the life I want to live or do I want to completely change my life? And I sent her a post today and it was basically this guy who said, left corporate at 38, started over in a new country, 3 kids in tow. And guess what? The hardest part wasn't moving, it was letting go of who I thought I had to be. Right. And I thought that was so powerful. So I'm curious if you had any of that like internal existential crisis as well.
Yes. When I made the decision to leave, I already had started my short term rentals. So I already had income coming through. And even though I didn't have sort of a foolproof plan of what I was going to happen, I was really confident that
Yeah.
I was going to make it and I was never going to have to knock on a corporate door ever again. And until I left my corporate job, that's when I realized, oh my God, how much of my identity was wrapped up in a corporate construct, in
Hmm.
needing to prove myself to make money, in needing to perform and wear this mask to be validated by others, in even needing to be needed, right?
Yeah.
When you go from corporate where you are constantly being called upon, where people are constantly asking you for your opinion, looking for you, needing you, and you go to working for yourself where you are alone most of the time, that for me, that was the hardest part. Not even
Yeah.
replacing my corporate income. It was really just being okay with not being needed, being okay
Yeah.
with not having that fancy title that everyone bows down to. And I think that's the unspoken conversation, which I'm so glad that you're bringing it up, that we need to talk more about because you don't realize it until you don't have that corporate title,
Hmm.
how much of it has defined who you are, who you believe you need to be, and who you believe or what you believe you need to do in order to make money.
Yeah. And I think that's such a beautiful place to be, though, because we wrap up so much of our identity in our jobs. And I think this is why so many people experience depression once they retire and stuff, because they're like, what do I do? Like, I've been this whole identity for my entire life. Like, who am I now? And I feel like when you do leap out of corporate at like an earlier time, be it in your 20s or your 30s or your 40s, right? You kind of have to face this question of who am I outside of my accomplishments, outside of my job? Like, who is Rebecca, right? Who is Olivia at their core? And it's so beautiful because you really get to learn more about yourself, you know?
Oh, yes. I honestly don't think there's any place you can grow more than when you're working for yourself or when you're just
Yes.
not dependent on a paycheck, because now everything has to be sourced from within.
Hey, girl, if you've been dreaming about building generational wealth and living life on your own terms, this one's for you. Now, 5 years ago, I was right where you are, okay? Burnt out, working a corporate engineering job, grinding with no real freedom in sight. Then I bought my first investment property, learned how to live for free, and started making money in my sleep. That one decision changed absolutely everything. I stopped relying on my 9 to 5 and eventually walked away from it for good. And trust me, I don't regret it. Now I'm on a mission to help other people do the same, which is exactly why I created Wanderlust Wealth Academy, a transformational program and community where I teach you how to buy your first or next investment property and live for free in 2025. Now, this community is for three kinds of people, okay? If you are stuck in a job that you don't love, secretly dreaming of more freedom, more travel, and more passive income, and you know you don't want to be climbing the corporate ladder for the next 10, 20, 30 years, this is for you. Or maybe you're a digital nomad or a travel girly who just wants to build wealth and create stability without giving up your freedom. Or maybe you're a business owner or high earning corporate baddie who just sees the market volatility and knows that it's time to diversify your income. If any of those sound like you and you're making at least $75,000, ideally six figures, and have a minimum of $10,000 that you can put towards a property, then go ahead and apply for the Wanderlust Wealth Academy. Now, this is going to be a completely free call to see if you're a good fit for us and also for us to see if we're a good fit for you. You can go ahead and apply at oliviatati.com/apply WWA. That's oliviatati.com/apply WWA. Or you can just go ahead and click the link in the show notes. Now, spots are limited. We only take a few new folks a month. So make sure to apply now before there are no spots left. And they go pretty quick. Because, my girl, freedom is so much closer than you think.
You can no longer depend on people patting you on your shoulder. You can no longer depend on people saying you're doing a good job. You got to now do all of that for yourself.
Completely. And so I'm curious because you said that whenever you transitioned out to be a full-time entrepreneur with Airbnbs and stuff, you weren't yet making a full-time income. And I was the same. I like had enough to cover my living expenses. I could get by, but I wasn't like rolling in Airbnb money when I quit my job. So can you kind of tell me, like, I guess first off, why did you go the Airbnb route and how did you get to the point where you were so confident in yourself and your ability to take the leap? Because I think that's what so many people really struggle with is they're like, I see other people doing this, but I don't believe in myself to be able to do it too.
That's a very good question. So, yeah, when I left, like, I'm going to be very transparent. Actually, I was just transferring the properties to my name. And the
Hmm.
legal process took longer than expected and all that. And one of my properties, the previous owner refused to vacate. So, literally, for 6 months, we were only making occupational income, which is like a third of that property's income potential on Airbnb. And so there were a lot of challenges with that. But the reason why I even went into Airbnb in the first place was because I put myself in rooms where other people were creating lives and earning without corporate strings attached. And I was just so fascinated. One of my mentors, very similar story, corporate director in a big company, Fortune 500, left it all to pursue freedom and a values first lifestyle. And I was like, if she can do it, I can do it too. But, the fear still was there. Like, what if this is the biggest mistake of my life? What if this flops on me, But for me, I was more afraid of not trying than trying and not failing because,
Completely.
yeah.
Well, that's like I live in more fear of regret for not trying something than wondering what if, right? Like it literally, if I got to my death, and I tell people this all the time. I always say, if I died tomorrow, I put it all on the table. Like I gave it my all. I put it all on the table. No one can come to me and tell me like I didn't put my best foot forward and live the most fulfilled life I possibly could because I truly try to live like there is no tomorrow and that there is like more to life and everything. And I think people don't necessarily have to live like that. And some people are okay with the what ifs, right? There's a select few people out there who know deep inside like that is not what they how they want to live their lives, you know?
Yes, yes. And it reminds me of this one book that one of my mentors suggested I read as I was deciding this big transition. It's called The Five Regrets of the Dying. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Ooh, I have heard of it, but I've never read it, and I've been looking for a new book, so I'm writing this down for myself.
Yeah, and one of the regrets, I mean, sorry to spill the beans, but one of the regrets of this woman just goes around, I think she's like an end of life nurse, and she goes around interviewing people who are on their deathbeds. And one of the most popular regrets that these people give is never having the courage to live true to themselves. And I think for me, that was also one of the questions I kept asking when I was faced with this decision. Will staying in corporate be true to myself, or will I be betraying myself and my family and my values and the things that I hold dear? And I think when you start to ask yourself better quality questions than, oh my God, what's going to happen after I leave this corporate job? Like you will end up with better quality solutions, and the decision and the path will be so much clearer than when you're just filling your mind with of things that have not even actualized, you know?
Yeah, completely. And, everyone wonders about the what ifs. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you the what ifs won't happen, right? Like the what ifs very much can and will happen. But you also have to understand that you were given the resourcefulness to figure it out. Like you have survived however many days, however many years to get yourself to today, and you still haven't died. Like you can get through this.
Yes, and I do also think, because many of us have either been raised by people who were in corporate or who just their main source of income was from someone else paying them for a living. Like a lot of this is also ingrained in our belief systems, and I get that it's hard to just make that shift. But when you start asking yourself these questions, when you start, listening to podcasts like yours, when you start putting yourself in rooms of people whose lives you actually admire and want to be living, and not just following the corporate title because it validates you, or because of people you don't even care about in the corporate world who keep patting your back and saying you can do it, that's when you start to shift and you start to truly create a life by design.
Completely. And so, how did you get to the point where you were like, I'm confident in myself. I can do this. I'm going to quit my job?
Yeah, well, plot twist. So up to the point when I put in my resignation letter, I had a 2-year corporate exit plan. So I
Mm,
had been associate director for 2 years, and I knew, okay, I was going to go all the way to, well, how it works in audit firms is you get admitted into the partnership. That's like the helm of your corporate career. And so that was the track that I wanted to go on. And I had this grand plan in my mind that once I become partner, I'll stay for like 6 months and then I will exit the partnership and buy my shares back. Obviously, that did not happen, given we are having this conversation.
oh.
But, I had a twist in my corporate story, and it wasn't exactly a Cinderella exit or farewell. I went from, being a top performer, and within 6 months, I got a shocker performance review that I was put on a low performance plan. And I was like,
Mm,
this is not it. I am just not going to stay in a place where I know I am not a low performer, and I
yeah.
know that I don't need to allow someone else to dictate my income ceiling. Even when you are a high performer, there are powers that be that sit in a room and decide how much percentage pay raise to give you. And sometimes it's not even based on the work you've put in, sometimes it's just based on the budget.
Okay, I love that you're saying this because this just woke up a memory in my brain from my dad. So he worked in the oil and gas industry. And I remember he was like a top performer, always longest time constantly getting promoted, and then we moved locations and he had a new boss, and the new boss just didn't like him for whatever reason. And so now he's like at this cap, not able to make more money, not getting promoted, just like constantly being put as just like regular baseline, even though he knew that he wasn't. And I remember being frustrated for him, like, and this is me as a child, right? Like as a 9-year old, being like, why don't you just leave? You know, like, why are you letting someone else dictate your life like that? And it's just like, I think some people have that mind, like you can choose to just follow the plan and agree that like it's out of your control, or you can take the control back into your hands.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And oh my goodness, wow. Such powerful questions you were asking at the age of 9. I hope my daughters follow suit.
I was like very sweet and I followed all the rules, but I was always curious, I think is what it was. I was like, why are we doing it this way? And that's why I'm not good in corporate America, because I'm always questioning, like, why are we doing this way? Oh.
Yeah, and honestly, I feel like I was at that crossroads too. It was either I was going to accept this low performance and get myself back on track to partnership and hope for the best, or I was going to take matters into my own hands, become the captain of my ship, or what's that phrase about, you're the master of your destiny, and really just start to believe that I can create the income that I desire and it doesn't have to be limited by someone else's performance review. And I
Mhm.
think it was also just the reality that in corporate, you could have a 10-year track record and then all of a sudden you're just as good as your last performance review.
Yeah.
Nothing else prior to that matters.
Yeah. No, it's so crazy. Honestly, it gives me PTSD because I'm like, I think performance reviews are great. And it's so interesting because now I'm like building a business and I realize like there's some of these structures that have to be in place for whatever reason. So it's so interesting because part of me is like, I understand why they had to put these systems in place and why they have to like run these hierarchies. It's interesting building a business now, but like resenting a lot of like structure that came from corporate, but also needing structure in order to run a business. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the irony of
Oh.
it. And, not everyone is meant for entrepreneurship. Not everyone is meant for, short term rental real estate. There will be some people who will at least try and be like,
Mhm.
okay, I actually love the predictability of being in a corporate job. And that's also okay. Like, there's nothing wrong
Mhm.
with that. It's just not even trying or just putting yourself in a box because someone else said this is the only path to success.
Completely, completely. Now, I want to switch gears a little because I think the thing that I also just find to be so fascinating about your story is like most of the people, obviously, on the podcast, they invest in the US, right? But you're not investing in
Yeah.
the US and you're not even located in the US. So, can you tell
Yeah.
everyone like where you're located, where you're investing, and like how you were able to apply that for yourself where you are?
Yes. So I was born in Kenya and then raised in South Africa and started my corporate career in South Africa and then moved back to Kenya when I got married. But I've always had, my roots in South Africa. And when I came across this short term rental idea, which actually came from someone in the US,
Yeah.
quite frankly, like this is global. It doesn't have to be, local based on your backyard. The advice was start in your backyard,
Yep.
start in your local town where you can easily access the properties and you can, get some experience under your belt before you try and expand elsewhere. And I was like, it doesn't actually make sense where I live because in Kenya, the property market here is just, it's quite flooded with, there's a lot of cash, so there's a lot of supply. And so even making money from an Airbnb context is quite challenging unless you have
Mm.
unique stays, like maybe you have a caravan or, these very, very fancy ideas that people have. It wasn't the model I wanted to go with. And so I was like, okay, let me look at what's possible in South Africa because I kind of have a good lay of the land. And even though I
Mm,
am not there, I know that I can set this thing up and I know it can work, right? I just believed from the get go that the blueprint can work if I just apply the principles and make sure, the numbers also make sense. Um,
totally. And so before that, like something I want to touch on is you
mm,
really appealed to your competitive advantage at the end of the day. Cause I
yeah,
think so many people stuck is they're like, where is the best place to buy and where am I going to get the best returns in the world? And it's like there's
yeah,
literally a whole world where you can buy like at the end of the day. And so you need to really tap into your competitive advantage. What locations
yeah,
do you know of? I think like part of why people even say to invest in your backyard, it's because you're right there. It
yeah.
takes away the where should I invest? It's like go somewhere where you have some sort of a competitive advantage, right? And to be fair, I had this same mentality when I first got started too. I was like, but where am I going to get the best ROI and best returns? And so I picked a market that I literally never go back to. And I have properties in Virginia, I've got other properties in other places, but my properties in Virginia, like I have no ties to Virginia. I just like blindly went into a market. Don't get me wrong, the properties are doing great, but I'm probably going to sell those here soon simply because I'd rather have properties in locations that I have a competitive advantage in, you know?
That's a really good point you've raised. And I never really thought about it that way until you said it. But it's true. Like, I think sometimes we just think we just have this narrow mind, or someone has told you to do it this way. And then you're just trying to force things to make it work that way and not
Mhm.
really thinking about where else could you make this work, like, and using the principle you've just shared where you potentially have that competitive advantage that's not necessarily in your backyard. I like that.
Yes, completely. Okay, so you pick South Africa. Where in South Africa do you go? What strategy do you choose?
Yeah, so Cape Town, I had actually looked at
Ah, I
the
love
Airbnb
Cape
model.
Town
Oh,
so
beautiful.
much. One of my favorite places. I'm like, I could live in Cape Town 100%.
Yay! So next time you come, you know where to stay.
Yes, I think my parents are actually gonna be there in, like, 2 weeks or something, so
Oh, that's awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So the first time I had looked at Cape Town, I was going for my sister's graduation. She went to university there, me too. And we stayed at this beautiful Airbnb. It was a 3 bed, and I just fell in love with the concept. I think that was maybe Oh, that was the first time in Africa that I was staying in an Airbnb. All the other times it was in Europe and Asia. So I had never really experienced this Airbnb thing in an African context. And I absolutely loved it. And I was like, I want an Airbnb like this. I actually went out like that very same week and I got hold of estate agents to look for Airbnbs in that same building, because it had the view and it was just amazing. It just ticked the boxes that I thought were necessary to make an Airbnb work. But the numbers just didn't work, no matter how I looked at the numbers. And thankfully, my actuarial background, I built a spreadsheet to like figure out if this thing was going to make money. It just didn't work. I tanked the idea and I was like, okay, this clearly is not going to work. And then a few years later, I came across this idea again, but the way it was being relayed was very different to my idea of Airbnb. And so I started to think very differently. So this time, instead of looking at big apartments, I was like, okay, how can I maybe look at smaller apartments where
Mm,
even the cost to entry is lower, but the marginal or sort of the revenue per square meter is more or less the same as a 3 bed. And that's how
yeah.
I sort of got into the market again. Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
I love that. Like, I'm so curious just because I'm finally starting to look at investing abroad. I'm probably going to go Italy first, but I've got like lots of different areas and Cape Town's always like been in the back of my head. So I'm curious as to like what are the rules and regulations like over there in terms of short-term rentals?
Yeah, well, right now there are no rules or
Oh.
regulations, which is crazy because there are 26,000 active Airbnbs in Cape
What?
Town.
That's insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are they
So
gonna add any rules? Do you think that there's any like commotion or any talk about adding new rules or anything like that?
Yeah, there is talk about adding rules. I think it's going to look different from the more developed economies because
Mhm.
an economy like Cape Town thrives on tourism. And
Yep.
so the government is going to have a balance between, clamping down on Airbnbs or imposing taxes, and making the place attractive for tourism, for, the gig economy where there's a lot of remote workers coming into the city. So I do think there will be some form of regulation in the next, at least, I would say, 3 to 5 years, but I don't think it's going to like shut down people's Airbnb's businesses, in my view. Or it will just make us think about Airbnbs differently. And the people who have actually done the numbers are the ones who are going to win.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I think, kind of what you said is, especially if you're going the Airbnb short-term rental route, I think like a mode of protection is to invest in areas that are heavily dependent on tourism, right? Because that's what Airbnb was originally, well, not originally, but that's what it was created for, was for places where you don't have a bunch of hotels and you don't have all these, like, people want a more local cozy vibe, and like they need tourism, right? Even before
Yeah,
Airbnb, there were things like B&Bs and um vacation homes and stuff like that. Like those are generally the areas you want to invest in because like the people need that income.
exactly, exactly. And I think that was very attractive for me in Cape Town was that when it's not peak season, you have people coming in for conferences. So there's a huge international conference center with a lot of big events across the year. And now, since COVID, people have realized actually I can work from anywhere in the country, even if my employer is in like Johannesburg, which is, a 2 hour flight away. So I
Yeah,
think also thinking about the different economic activities in this potential cities you want to invest in can really help, because again, also just being fully dependent on tourism, can, become an issue with seasonality and
completely.
income, especially if this is a cash flow. If you're going in for cash flow and you want it to in some way replace a percentage of your corporate income if you want to leave your
Totally.
corporate job.
And so, okay, let's kind of role play this. Let's say I'm someone coming to you. I'm like, I really want to buy a short term rental in Cape Town. Where do I start? Like, are there things I need? Especially, let's say I'm not from South Africa. Is
Mhm.
there anything like that I would need to sign up for, be it tax wise, be it business wise? Do I have to register for anything? Like, how does that look?
Yeah, so the first thing you would want to do is find out what is your mortgage affordability, assuming you are
Hmm.
coming into this market and you want to take advantage of mortgage lending. The great thing about South Africa is that foreigners can get up to 50%
Oh, that's
of
great.
the house value in the form of a mortgage. And then the rest, obviously, you would have to put up as a down payment. So that's the first thing you would want to do. And typically, these evaluations are done by bond originators. They're called bond originators. So they're kind of like agents or middlemen between you and the big banks. And they just do things so much faster. You get responses so much faster. And even when you apply for a mortgage, you want to go through a bond originator because everything just goes so much faster and more efficiently. So that's the first thing you want to do. Then you want to start looking at, different potential markets using the principles we've just shared. Like Olivia, you've talked about your competitive advantage. Maybe you've already established yourself in Airbnbs in business hubs, right? And so maybe a place like Johannesburg might be better for you because that is, the business capital of the country, right? Or maybe you are like a tourist pro when it comes to Airbnbs, and so beachfront houses might be your thing, right? In Cape Town, that's the beauty of Cape Town. You get a variety. I only invest in apartments, but there are people who only invest in beachfront houses, and that might be
Yeah,
your thing. And then just understanding your niche. And then, you need to have someone on the ground for sure to help you, go and look at these properties and vet them before you put any offers to purchase.
completely. Okay, I love it. I feel like it's so possible. I'm like, oh, maybe I go buy in Cape Town.
It is.
I love this. So, I'm curious for you. When you finally quit corporate and went all in on your business, I'm guessing everything went perfectly smooth. You ran into zero issues. It was absolutely perfect the entire time, right?
Right. Wrong.
Yeah. So, can you kind of tell me how that transition went for you? And what were some of those struggles that you really faced? Because I think that people kind of think, right? And I remember thinking this too. And to be fair, it's nice to have these rose colored glasses at the beginning, like, oh, it's going to be perfect after all of this. But, like, obviously, you're going to run into some challenges, you're going to run into issues, and you're completely changing your life, right?
Yeah.
So, can you tell me, like, some of those, like, challenges you faced and how you overcame them? And like even some mental struggles that may have happened as well.
Yeah, well, I the biggest mental struggle for me, or the question I kept asking myself was, what if people don't book? And now I have to
Mhm.
pay these mortgages, and now I've left my corporate job. Now what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Right? And fortunately, I was able to secure consulting jobs outside when I left my corporate job, and so that really put the pressure off having to make these Airbnbs work. And I would highly encourage anyone who's thinking of leaving their corporate job to just have a sort of additional income come through. Especially for times when maybe if you're investing in a seasonal place where you invest in a low peak season and now you have to like sustain yourself before the high peak.
Yeah.
That is another lesson I learned. So and sometimes you can't time these things because of all the legalities around it. So I didn't know that legal procedures to transfer a house, a purchase, could take up to 4 months.
Mhm.
And so that was also a shock for me, that about how long it would take to actually, from the time I put my offer to the time I owned the place and started making money. That for me, that was something that I had not thought of. And then also inspecting, oh my goodness, inspecting properties before you put offers to purchase is so, so important. I think at the back of our minds, we think inspecting is just doing a house viewing, like what you would do before you buy a house you want to live in. But when it's a house you want to rent out as an Airbnb, you have to be so much more thorough.
Yeah.
And that was a learning lesson that I learned the hard way. And, nowadays, I make sure my offers to purchase are watertight and there are conditions on which I will go through with the sale that are documented if I haven't, been able to do the or to get people on the ground to help me do that thorough sort of inspection. I would say those are the top three things that really surprised me. And then, of course, like I shared earlier, the story of the eviction where I had not actually looked at the fine print to see that there was a clause that allowed the previous owner or the previous owner's tenant to stay in the property. And then I would have to go through this entire eviction clause, which is so difficult to like evict people in South Africa. You can't just like change the locks or cut off the water. That's actually illegal. Yeah. So I would say those were my top four learning lessons. But it makes you stronger, and you just become so much more switched on, and you see things from afar the next time you're looking at a property, and you're able to walk away even when the agent is like, this is the deal of the century.
Well, and it's like you wouldn't know that if you didn't go through it. I think everyone is so obsessed with like, I have to know everything beforehand. It's like, no, you're not going to learn everything beforehand. It's literally impossible. That's like telling a doctor that they are going to learn everything that they need to know about a surgery before actually doing the surgery. And like, yes, you can prepare as much as you possibly can, but I think every surgeon will tell you you learn on the job. That is where you really learn how to do this. And that's why not everyone can be a surgeon because you have to like do the actual thing?
Exactly. And I mean, similar principle applies to Airbnb. Like, you've got to go in knowing that some of your biggest learning lessons will come from some of your mistakes, and that is also okay.
Completely, completely. No, this has been great because my mom literally just called me the other day and we have properties in Angola. We need like, and so my parents very much live part-time in the US, part-time in Angola, but they don't rent out their house in Angola at all. And it just gets dusty and it gets, issues. So the reason I actually like Airbnbs is because, especially if you do travel, you have someone looking at your property all the time. They're checking to make sure the water works, they're checking to make sure the electrical works, they're checking to make sure nothing's broken, they're checking, there's always people checking it. Versus if you just leave it by itself, that's when you actually get more damage to the property. So we're
Yeah.
actually going to start looking into, does it make sense to rent out their house over there, um, while they're traveling and while they're gone?
Yeah, yeah. And there is no better tenant than an Airbnb guest to tell you when there's something wrong with your property. It's like
Complete.
they're
They
just
will tell
waiting.
you. They will tell you for sure.
They're just waiting for something to go wrong and they are on the phone. They are on Airbnb telling you this needs to be fixed ASAP.
Oh my gosh, so funny, so funny.
Yeah.
And then I guess even from just like a personal standpoint, how has this transition to full-time entrepreneurship, real estate investor been for you comparison to your old corporate life? And I guess what are some things that surprised you there and that you wish you'd known beforehand?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest transformations have been in my identity, who I believe myself to be, and the belief systems I have around making money, around working for fulfillment, and even just opening up myself to receiving in a way that is not dependent on a performance review.
Mhm.
People do not, of course, Airbnb is based on, your guest reviews, but someone is not booking my Airbnb because I was an ex associate director and I had this and that title and I did all these things. And I think these new alternative ways of earning, which is what I call the new economy, it does require you to sort of shift how you see yourself and your ability to receive and earn money differently to how you've traditionally been conditioned in the corporate world. And if you don't do that inner work, you will sabotage yourself at some point unnecessarily. So it's just as important as having that strategy, as having that spreadsheet to sort of vet potential properties. For me, I would say that's one of the biggest learning lessons. And then something that surprised me was how I don't want to use the word how much harder. I would say how much more challenging it is to build a business, to run property portfolios when you're doing this by yourself
Mhm.
without sort of that corporate institution to sort of protect you, you
Yeah.
know? Because now you are the CEO, you're the CFO, you're the COO. You're literally the every person.
Yeah.
And the buck stops with you, quite literally. And the level of self responsibility, self discipline that you have to have is like tons more than in your corporate career. And that was something that surprised me because I thought, when I was in my corporate career, I was leading a team of 20, speaking on international stages, representing a big global brand. And I thought, I had it. But when you are in your home office doing all this by yourself, firefighting, dealing with so many different issues on any given day, it calls for a very different
Completely.
mindset, a very different level of agility and resilience. And I think also growth comes from there. Because when I just look back at the last year and I see who I am now and who I was a year ago, I mean, I feel like I need a telescope to like zoom in on who I used to be. And growth is beautiful because with growth, your income earning capacity also increases. Your fulfillment also increases. And, you just get to this level and you realize, okay, I can handle even bigger things. And
Yeah.
I think that's something that people underestimate. And now I understand why, like, if, most people who win the lottery lose all that money in less than a year because they haven't done the inner work. Their
Completely.
identity is not aligned with the identity of $1 million investor or, a millionaire.
Completely. And that's actually, I have a 30-day challenge going on right now in my Substack. And so, for anyone who's listening, join the Substack. But that's like a big part of what we talk about is like stepping into this next level identity because everyone gets so bogged down on like, I don't know what to do. I need the strategy. I need a blah, blah, blah. Like, no, half of it is you just aren't the person. You have not like allowed yourself to become the person that can hold that yet. And you have to like create the belief in yourself and build yourself up so that you can do this, you know?
Yeah, and I think the beautiful thing about it, well, it's double-sided, you know. You are the reason you've created all the results so far in your life, but you're also the reason you can create a different set of results. And like you're saying, when you do the inner work to shift your beliefs, your frequency, aka your emotional state, the actions you're going to take are going to be very different, and the results are also going to be very different.
Completely. Well, this has been so wonderful, Rebecca. We're going to hop into the three final questions I ask every single person. So, number one, what is your ideal perfect day?
Ooh, that is a very good question. Okay, so doing the school drop for me is a non-negotiable. So I do the school
Yeah.
drop in the morning. And then after that, an ideal morning is just, quietly getting into the day, doing my journaling with my candle on, and really just doing that inner work. Peaceful morning with no calls and people looking for me, no calendar meetings. So I usually like try and schedule my calendar so that meetings only start from around 11 in the morning
Yep.
up to around 4. And I also love doing my morning walk. So in there, I also want to schedule in my morning walk if I haven't gone to the gym early. And then, yeah, just getting into like real for a good 4 hours of focused work, and then making myself ready for the afternoon when the kids come, and just being a present mom when they are there, and not being the, oh, I'm busy, I'm in a meeting, or I need to finish this, which is one of the biggest joys of working for myself. Really just being in charge of my time and my calendar and not having to ask for permission to go to a sports event or to do something that's, unplanned at my kids' school. Yeah, so just being present in all the different areas of my life. Um, yeah, without that sort of pressure that usually comes with these high earning corporate jobs.
I love that. And I mean, that's really what it's all about, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, question number two. What is your mantra or something that you tell yourself over and over again?
You get to live your life by design, and you get to take responsibility for that.
Yeah, I love that. And that's so true. It's so true. And I think a lot of people
Yeah.
almost default to not taking responsibility because it honestly, a lot of the time, it is the easier option, right? It's the easier
Yes.
option to just kind of let life happen to you, but like
Yes.
remembering that you have full control over your life at the end of the day.
Exactly. Exactly.
I love
And
that.
for anyone who wants to read a book, which actually that's sort of the inspiration behind that mantra, it's called A Happy Pocket Full of Money. So you can add that to your book list if you haven't read it. It's by David Cameron Gikandi. It's a really good book on money mindset.
Love that. Okay, last question. What does wealth mean to you?
Peace of mind, being fully present, living a life that allows me to earn while having my values first. And my values are family, fun, freedom, and travel. So if I am earning and sacrificing any of those four things, that's not wealth for me. And then being an owner. Being an owner,
Completely.
ownership is the ultimate form of wealth. You can have a high earning corporate job and absolutely not wealthy.
Completely. I love this, Rebecca. This was so wonderful. Where can people find you or reach out to you if they have any questions or want to learn more about what you're doing in over there in South Africa?
Yes, yes. So I have a free gift for your listeners. It's called The New Economy. It's a free training series that really helps people understand how to tap into this new economy where you're
Mm,
earning not based on proving yourself, performance, or pressure, and how to, take advantage and explore different earning income streams. based actually on your human design and your unique inner
I'm
guidance
obsessed
system.
with human design.
Yay! What's your human design?
I'm a manifesting generator to a T. Yeah, a
Yeah, I could have
1-3
guessed so.
manifesting generator.
Ooh, nice.
How
So
about
you're
you?
very
What are you?
experiential.
Yes,
I
and
am a
that's why
2-4
I'm all
projector.
about it. Oh, ooh,
Yes,
that's awesome. I
yes.
love that. Oh my gosh, yeah, human design. I just started like a new mastermind, and the first thing we do is we pull everyone's human design charts and we're like, okay, let's build your life around this. Like, this is why you either feel frustrated or annoyed. And I'm like, literally thinking about this about like how I'm building my business right now. And there's one sticky part that I'm frustrated by. And I'm like, I need to go tap back into my human design.
Very good idea.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Amazing. So we'll include the link to that in the show notes. But Rebecca, this has been so wonderful, and it's honestly made me reinvigorated to go and respond to my mom and be like, okay, time to actually set up the Airbnb in Angola. But
You got this. You can do it.
I know. I was like, this is the first year I have not bought a property in like 4 years. And it feels really nice. I'm not going to lie to not have to do setup or anything. And I told myself I'm not buying anything this year. And I'm like, oh my gosh, are we going to do this? Another one. And I told myself not until next year is when I take on a whole nother property. But yeah,
You're a money Jenny, so I wouldn't
I
be
know.
surprised if you change your mind.
I know. Oh my goodness. So ridiculous. Well, this has been so wonderful, Rebecca. Thank you so much. You're going to inspire so many. I'm so excited to see what else you do.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me on your podcast, Olivia.
Thank you so much for listening to Wanderlust Wealth Show. Now, don't forget to follow the podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you love this episode, it would literally mean the world to me if you shared this with a friend or a family member, or literally like anyone off of the street. Like right now, go ahead, share it so you don't forget, or post it on social media and make sure to tag me. I love seeing what you're listening in on and what you resonated with, and I'm just so freaking thankful for you. I'm so freaking excited for you. I love you, and don't forget, life really doesn't have to be hard.